The village of Borgo clung to the mountainside like a wound that refused to heal. Its wooden houses, weathered grey by centuries of Carpathian winters, huddled together against the perpetual shadow cast by Castle Dracula. The fortress loomed on the highest peak, a crown of black stone and twisted spires that seemed to drink the moonlight rather than reflect it. No smoke rose from its chimneys, no lights flickered in its windows, yet every soul in Borgo knew with terrible certainty that the castle was never empty. Mihail pressed his calloused hands against the rough wood of his cottage door, listening to the wind howl through the valley like the cry of a wounded animal. Inside, his wife Elena nursed their infant son by the dying embers of their hearth. The firelight painted golden shadows across her worried face, deepening the lines that had appeared too early around her eyes. Life in Borgo aged people quickly. Fear had a way of carving itself into flesh. "The bells have stopped," Elena whispered, clutching their child closer to her breast. "Mihail, the church bells have stopped." He heard it too, the sudden, suffocating silence that followed the abrupt end of the warning toll. Father Vasile had been ringing the iron bells for nearly an hour, their mournful clanging echoing through the valley, as it did every time the castle's servants came down from the mountain. It meant girls were being taken. It meant the Count was hungry for new brides. Mihail's jaw tightened. He was a simple man, a farmer who worked the thin soil between the rocks, who traded his meager harvest for salt and oil, who had never traveled beyond the neighboring village of his birth. His hands knew the weight of a plough, not a sword. His prayers were for rain and good harvest, not for the courage to face evil. Yet something burned in his chest tonight, something that refused to be extinguished by common sense or survival instinct. "I have to go," he said quietly. Elena's head snapped up, her eyes wide with terror. "No, Mihail, no. They took the Constantine girls, both of them. Anna and Maria." His voice cracked with emotion. "They're children, Elena, 14 and 16 years old. And you are one man." Elena rose from her chair, the baby stirring against her shoulder. "One poor farmer against the servants of the devil himself. What can you possibly do except throw your life away and leave your son fatherless?" Mihail turned to face his wife, and in the firelight she saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. Not recklessness or foolish bravery, but a quiet, terrible certainty. "If I do nothing," he said softly, "what kind of father would I be? What kind of man? When our son is old enough to ask what I did the night the Constantine girls were taken, what will I tell him? That I hid in my house and thanked God it wasn't my family this time?" Tears streamed down Elena's face. "Better a living coward than a dead hero. Better you here with us than your bones scattered on that cursed mountain." He crossed the small room and cupped her face gently in his rough hands, pressing his forehead to hers. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you and our son, more than my own breath. But if I let fear make me less than human, then I'm already dead. I'm already one of them." Elena sobbed against his chest, knowing with the awful clarity of a wife's intuition that no words would change his mind. Mihail held her for a long moment, breathing in the scent of wood smoke and milk that clung to her hair, memorizing the warmth of her body against his. Then he gently pulled away, crossed to the corner where he kept his tools, and selected the only weapons he possessed, a woodcutter's axe and a hunting knife, whose blade had been worn thin by years of sharpening. From the shelf above their bed, he took down the small wooden cross that had belonged to his grandmother. The old woman had died clutching it, whispering prayers against the darkness. He hung it around his neck, tucking it beneath his shirt where he could feel the wood warm against his skin. "If I'm not back by dawn," he said, not looking at Elena because he couldn't bear to see her face, "take our son and go to your sister in Bistritz. Don't wait. Don't come looking for me. Just go." He stepped out into the night before she could respond, closing the door on her muffled weeping. The wind bit through his thin jacket, carrying with it the smell of pine and something else, something sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long on a grave. The village square was empty. Doors and windows were shut tight, barred from within. Not a single candle burned in any house. Borgo had learned long ago that when the castle's servants came hunting, the only defense was to hide and pray you weren't chosen. No one interfered. No one protested. The village had made its peace with damnation decades before Mihail was born, but Mihail could not make peace with it. Not tonight. The church stood at the edge of the square, its wooden bell tower reaching toward heaven like a desperate plea. Father Vasile's door stood ajar, swinging slightly in the wind. Mihail approached cautiously, his axe held ready. Inside, the sanctuary was dark except for the eternal flame burning before the altar, a small red light that seemed pitifully inadequate against the ocean of shadows. "Father?" Mihail called softly. A groan answered him from behind the altar. Mihail hurried forward and found the old priest crumpled on the floor, blood streaming from a gash above his eye. His vestments were torn, his silver cross ripped from his neck and lying bent against the wall. "They came so fast," Father Vasile gasped as Mihail helped him sit up. "3 of them, pale as corpses, strong as bulls. I tried to bar the door, tried to ring the bells to warn—" He clutched Mihail's arm with surprising strength. "They laughed, my son. When I held up the cross and spoke the holy words, they laughed. They said their master grows tired of our prayers, that our God has abandoned this valley to him." "Where did they take the girls?" Mihail demanded. The priest's eyes widened with horror and understanding. "No, Mihail, you cannot mean to. The castle is a tomb for the living. You'll never even reach the gates." "Where did they take them?" Father Vasile sagged in defeat. "The north road. They travel slowly when they have captives, savoring the fear. But they had perhaps 20 minutes lead on you, maybe less. They'll take them through the mountain pass and up the serpent path to the castle gates." He grabbed Mihail's hand and pressed something into it, a small vial of water that glinted in the candlelight. Holy water, blessed by the Archbishop himself when he visited 10 years past. "It's all I have that might help you. And this—" He fumbled at his belt and produced a silver dagger, its handle wrapped in white cloth. "My father carried this when he was a young man, before the Count took his sister. He said silver burns them. I don't know if it's true. I've never been brave enough to find out." Mihail took the vial and the dagger, tucking them carefully into his belt. "Thank you, Father. I'll pray for you," the old priest whispered, "though I fear my prayers reach no higher than this ceiling anymore." "Then pray for the girls," Mihail said. "Pray they survive until I reach them." He left the church and ran toward the north road, his worn boots pounding against the frozen earth. The forest closed around him like the walls of a throat, pine trees towering black against the star-scattered sky. The moon hung full and white, casting the world in shades of silver and shadow. Mihail followed the road upward, his breath coming in harsh gasps, his heart hammering against his ribs. He ran for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, driven by desperation and something else, a strange, fierce joy that he was finally, after years of bowing and scraping and surviving, standing up, fighting back, refusing to accept that evil was simply the way of things. Then he heard the screaming. It came from somewhere ahead, young voices roar with terror. Mihail burst through a stand of trees and stumbled into a small clearing where the road widened. There, in the center of the moonlit space, he saw them. 2 girls, bound at the wrists with leather cords, were being dragged forward by 3 figures in long black cloaks. Anna and Maria Constantine. He recognized them even with their hair wild and their dresses torn. The younger girl, Anna, had collapsed to her knees and was being hauled along the ground, her screams echoing through the forest. Maria tried to help her sister, pleading in a hoarse voice that broke Mihail's heart. The 3 servants of Dracula moved with an unnatural grace, their faces hidden beneath deep cowls. But Mihail could see their hands, pale, long-fingered, tipped with nails that curved like talons. One of them bent down and struck Anna across the face with casual brutality, silencing her screams into whimpers. "Leave them alone," Mihail shouted, stepping into the clearing with his axe raised. The 3 figures froze. Slowly, impossibly slowly, they turned to face him. Moonlight caught the edges of their faces beneath the cowls, skin like yellowed parchment stretched over bone, eyes that reflected light like an animal's, mouths that seemed too wide and too full of teeth. "A village rat," one of them hissed, its voice like wind through a crypt. "How amusing." "Let the girls go," Mihail said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Take me instead." The 3 servants laughed, a sound like breaking glass and rattling bones. "We do not bargain with cattle," the largest one said. It took a step toward Mihail and he could smell its breath from 6 feet away, blood and earth and decay. "Our master has chosen these flowers for his garden, but if you wish to join them so badly, we can arrange that. The Count always has use for more servants." "I said let them go." Mihail charged forward with a roar that was more terror than courage, swinging his axe with all his strength. The servant moved with inhuman speed, but Mihail had surprise on his side. The axe blade caught the creature across the shoulder, biting deep. Black blood sprayed across the snow, steaming where it landed. The servant shrieked, a sound that made Mihail's ears ring and his vision blur, and staggered backward. The other 2 released the girls and rushed at Mihail with claws extended. He barely managed to dodge the first one, feeling talons rake across his back through his jacket. Pain exploded across his spine. He spun and slashed wildly with the axe, forcing them back for a moment. "Run!" he screamed at the girls. "Run back to the village, now!" Maria grabbed her sister and hauled her to her feet. For a frozen instant, the younger girl locked eyes with Mihail, and he saw in her face a gratitude so profound it pierced him like a blade. Then they were running, crashing through the underbrush, their footsteps fading into the forest. The servants turned to pursue them, but Mihail threw himself at the nearest one, grappling with it, using his weight to bear it to the ground. Up close, the creature was a nightmare made flesh, its face a skull covered in translucent skin, its mouth opening impossibly wide to reveal rows of needle teeth. It screeched in his face, and he felt its foul breath on his skin, felt its claws tearing at his arms. He fumbled for the vial at his belt, yanked it free and smashed it against the creature's face. The holy water struck like acid. The servant's scream reached a pitch beyond human hearing. Smoke rose from its face where the water touched, flesh bubbling and melting. It thrashed beneath Mihail with inhuman strength, throwing him off and into the snow. Before he could rise, the largest servant was on him, lifting him by the throat with one hand. Mihail's feet kicked uselessly at the air. His vision began to darken at the edges. Through the roaring in his ears, he heard the creature speak. "You have cost us our prizes, little rat. You have spilled our blood. For this, you will suffer long before you die." Mihail's hand found the silver dagger at his belt. With the last of his strength, he drove it upward into the creature's chest. Silver met dead flesh with a sound like sizzling meat. The servant's eyes went wide with shock and pain. It dropped Mihail and stumbled backward, staring at the dagger protruding from its chest. Black blood ran down its robes in thick streams. "Silver," it gasped. "He carries blessed silver." The three servants looked at each other, some silent communication passing between them. The one Mihail had struck with the axe was still smoking, its wound refusing to close. The one he'd splashed with holy water had half its face melted away, revealing bone beneath. The largest one swayed on its feet, the silver dagger still embedded in its chest. "The master will hear of this," the largest one hissed. "He will hear how a peasant has interfered with his will. He will hear your name, Mihail of Borgo, and he will come for you himself." Then they were gone, not running, but simply vanishing into the shadows, as if they had never been solid things at all. One moment they stood there, three figures of nightmare. The next, there was only darkness and the whisper of wind through the pines. Mihail collapsed to his knees in the snow, gasping for air. His back burned where the claws had raked him. His throat throbbed where fingers like iron had nearly crushed his windpipe. But he was alive. And the girls were free, running back toward the village and safety. He had done it. By all the saints, he had actually done it. Mihail knelt there in the moonlight, shaking with exhaustion and disbelief until the cold became too much to bear. Then he gathered his axe and began the long walk home, never once looking back at the dark mountain and the blacker castle that crowned it. He did not know that from the highest tower of that castle, two eyes watched him, eyes that had seen empires rise and fall, that had looked upon the face of death and laughed. Eyes that now studied this simple farmer with something that might have been curiosity, or might have been hunger, or might have been something far more dangerous. Count Dracula leaned forward slightly, his pale fingers drumming once against the stone windowsill. "Interesting," he murmured to the darkness. "Very interesting indeed." Behind him, in the shadows of his chamber, something rustled and whispered, the voices of his remaining brides, eager and hungry, asking what he had seen. But Dracula raised one hand for silence, and the whispers died away. He would wait until tomorrow night. He would let the peasant return to his home, embrace his wife, kiss his child. He would let the man feel safe for one more day. Let him believe that courage and faith had won him a victory. Then, when the sun set and darkness reclaimed the world, Count Dracula would pay a visit to the cottage of Mihail the Brave. And he would make an offer that would test the very limits of human love and human fear. The Count smiled, and in the moonlight his teeth gleamed white and sharp. "Come tomorrow night, little hero," he whispered to the wind. "Come tomorrow, and we shall see what your courage is truly worth." Mihail reached his cottage as the first grey light of dawn touched the eastern sky. His body screamed with pain. The claw wounds across his back had bled through his shirt, and his throat bore the purple imprint of fingers that should not exist. Elena met him at the door, her face pale with sleepless terror, and caught him as his legs finally gave way. "Mihail, oh God, oh merciful God!" She dragged him inside and bolted the door behind them, her hands shaking as she helped him to their bed. Their son slept in his cradle by the hearth, blissfully unaware of the horror his father had faced. "The girls," Mihail gasped through cracked lips. "Did they make it back?" Elena nodded, tears streaming down her face as she began cutting away his ruined shirt. Yes, they came running through the village square just after midnight, screaming about how you saved them." Old Constantine wept in the street. "Half the village wants to call you a hero. The other half—" Her voice broke. "The other half says you've doomed us all." Mihail closed his eyes as Elena cleaned his wounds with water heated over the fire. The pain was exquisite, each touch of the cloth against torn flesh sending lightning through his nerves. But worse than the physical agony was the memory of those final words, spoken in a voice like the grave itself. "He will hear your name, Mihail of Borgo, and he will come for you himself." "Elena," he whispered, "you need to take our son and leave. Today. Now. Don't wait for nightfall. I won't leave you." Her voice was fierce, stubborn. "Whatever comes, we face it together. You don't understand. I understand that you risked everything to save those girls. I understand that you're the bravest man I've ever known, and the most foolish." She pressed a clean cloth against the worst of his wounds, making him hiss in pain. "And I understand that if death comes for you, it will have to take me first. I'm your wife, Mihail, for better or worse. Even if worse means the devil himself knocking on our door." He wanted to argue, to command her to go, but exhaustion dragged him down into darkness before he could form the words. His last conscious thought was of those eyes watching him from the castle tower, ancient eyes that had seen centuries pass like heartbeats, eyes that now knew his name. He slept through the day in a fever, his dreams plagued by visions of pale faces and crimson mouths, of castles built from bones and rivers running with blood. In his nightmares, he heard laughter echoing through stone corridors, and a voice that promised him eternity if he would only open his eyes and accept the gift. When he finally woke, the sun was setting. Elena sat beside the bed, her hand clasped tightly in his, her face drawn with worry. The baby fussed in his cradle, sensing the tension that filled the small cottage like smoke. Outside, Mihail could hear the sounds of the village preparing for night, doors slamming shut, shutters being barred, prayers being whispered in frightened voices. "How do you feel?" Elena asked softly. Mihail tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. His back felt like it had been scoured with hot iron. "Like I wrestled with demons and lost." "You wrestled with demons and won," she corrected him, helping him prop himself against the wall. She brought him water and thin broth, which he drank gratefully. "The Constantine family came by earlier. They wanted to thank you, but I told them you were sleeping. Old Constantine left this." She held up a small leather pouch that clinked with the sound of coins. "Everything he had. He said it wasn't enough, could never be enough, but he wanted you to have it." Mihail pushed the pouch away gently. "I didn't do it for money. I know, that's why he gave it." Elena set the pouch on the table and returned to his side, taking his hand again. "Father Vasile came too. He brought more holy water and blessed our threshold. He said," she hesitated, biting her lip, "he said if the Count truly means to come for you, no blessing in the world will stop him, but that we should pray anyway, because prayer is all we have left." "Comforting," Mihail muttered. The last light faded from the window. Darkness settled over Borgo like a shroud, and with it came a silence so complete that Mihail could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Even the wind had died. The world seemed to be holding its breath. Then, from somewhere far away, came the sound of wolves howling. Elena's grip on his hand tightened painfully. "Mihail!" "I hear them." The howling grew closer, a chorus of inhuman voices that made the baby begin to cry. Elena rushed to the cradle and lifted their son, holding him close to her chest and whispering soothing words that did nothing to calm him. The child wailed as if he could sense the wrongness approaching, the corruption that moved through the night toward their home. Mihail forced himself to stand, biting back a groan of pain. He retrieved his axe from where it leaned against the wall and positioned himself between the door and his family. His hands shook, but he tightened his grip on the weapon's handle until his knuckles went white. The howling stopped. In the terrible silence that followed, they heard footsteps approaching the cottage. Slow, measured steps that seemed to make no sound against the frozen earth, yet somehow echoed through Mihail's bones. Then came a knock at the door. 3 deliberate raps, perfectly spaced, almost polite. "Mihail of Borgo," a voice called from outside. It was rich and cultured, with an accent that spoke of old nobility and older power. "I have come a long way to speak with you. Will you deny me hospitality?" Elena made a small sound of terror. Mihail's mouth went dry. He had heard that voice before, not with his ears but in his nightmares, in the fevered dreams that had plagued his sleep. It was a voice that had spoken to emperors and sultans, that had whispered in the ears of kings and watched them dance like puppets on invisible strings. "Go away," Mihail managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're not welcome here." A soft laugh answered him, like silk sliding over a blade. "Not welcome? But my dear fellow, I have come all this way simply to thank you. You performed a great service for me last night, whether you intended to or not. The least you can do is hear what I have to say. I have nothing to say to you, monster." "Monster," the voice seemed to taste the word, rolling it around like wine. "Such harsh language for one who has never met me. Come now, Mihail, where are your manners? Your brave wife, your innocent child, surely they deserve to see the face of the one who rules these mountains. Surely they would like to know whom you have chosen to defy." "Don't open the door," Elena whispered desperately. "Mihail, please." But even as she spoke, Mihail felt a strange compulsion settling over him like a heavy cloak. His feet moved toward the door without his conscious command. His hand reached for the bolt. "That's right," the voice purred from beyond the threshold. "Invite me in, Mihail. Let us speak as men of honor speak, face to face with honesty between us. You have questions. I have answers. And I promise you, upon my word as a nobleman, that no harm will come to you or yours this night. Not by my hand, nor by any who serve me. You have my oath." "His oath means nothing," Elena cried. "He's the father of lies." "I am many things," the voice interrupted, and for the first time there was an edge of something dark beneath the cultured tones. "But I am not a liar. I have lived for centuries, woman, and in all that time I have never broken an oath freely given. My word is iron. My honor is eternal. And I swear to you both, on the blood that sustains me and the darkness that birthed me, that you will not be harmed this night if you open this door." Mihail's hand touched the bolt. Some part of him screamed to stop, to bar the door and pray until dawn. But another part, the part that had driven him to save the Constantine girls, the part that refused to bow to evil, needed to see, needed to look into the face of the thing that had terrorized his village for generations, needed to know his enemy. He drew back the bolt and opened the door. Count Dracula stood on the threshold. He was not what Mihail expected. There was no rotting corpse, no skeletal horror with eyes of fire. Instead, he saw a tall man, dressed in black velvet and silk, his clothing of a style decades out of fashion, but impeccably maintained. The Count's face was pale as marble, aristocratic and handsome in a cold, ageless way. His hair was silver white, pulled back from a high forehead. His hands, folded before him, were long and elegant, the hands of a musician or a scholar. But his eyes were ancient beyond measure, black as the spaces between stars, holding depths that mortal minds were never meant to comprehend. When Dracula smiled, his teeth were very white and slightly too sharp. "Good evening," he said with grave courtesy. "Thank you for receiving me." He did not enter. He stood just beyond the threshold, making no move to cross it, and Mihail understood with cold clarity that the legends were true. A vampire could not enter a home uninvited. The Count was bound by rules older than memory, laws written into the fabric of his cursed existence. "Say what you came to say," Mihail managed, raising the axe slightly. "Then leave." Dracula's gaze flicked to the weapon, and his smile widened fractionally. "How delightful! You actually believe you could hurt me with that?" He held up one hand, palm forward, in a gesture of peace. "But I gave my word, did I not? I will not harm you, though I confess, Mihail, you have already harmed me. My servants returned to the castle last night in quite a state, one with silver burning in his chest, another with her face melted by consecrated water, the third bearing an axe wound that refuses to heal. They were most distressed." "Good," Mihail said flatly. "Yes," Dracula agreed, surprising him. "Good indeed. Do you know how long it has been since anyone in this miserable valley showed even a flicker of courage? Decades, Mihail. Generations. Your grandparents bowed to me. Your parents bowed to me. Every soul in Borgo has learned to avert their eyes when my servants walk among them, to offer up their daughters without protest, to accept damnation as the price of survival." His eyes glittered in the darkness. "And then you, a peasant, a farmer with calloused hands and a back bent from labor, you dared to say no, you dared to fight. Those girls were innocent." "All my brides were innocent once," Dracula replied calmly. "That is rather the point. Innocence is the sweetest wine, the most intoxicating nectar. but it fades so quickly once corruption takes hold. Within a month, your precious Anna and Maria would have been just like the others, hungry, beautiful, eternal. He tilted his head, studying Mihail with those terrible eyes. You robbed me of that pleasure. You stole what was mine by ancient right. Some would say you owe me a debt. I owe you nothing. No, Dracula said softly. You do not. In fact, it is I who owe you. Mihail blinked, certain he had misheard. Behind him, Elena held their crying son close, watching the vampire with wide, terrified eyes. You see, Dracula continued, you have given me something I have not felt in a very long time, something precious and rare. He paused, savoring the moment. You have given me interest, curiosity, a puzzle to contemplate. You are not what you should be, Mihail of Borgo. You should be a coward like all the others, content to survive on your knees. But instead, you are, he searched for the word, remarkable. What do you want? Mihail demanded. To make you an offer. Dracula spread his hands, a gesture of magnanimous generosity. You saved my brides-to-be. Such an action cannot go unrewarded. So I offer you a choice, simple farmer, a gift beyond price, beyond the comprehension of ordinary men. I want nothing from you. You will hear me out. The command in those words was absolute, brooking no argument. Mihail found himself frozen, unable to speak as Dracula's voice washed over him like ice water. I offer you immortality, Mihail. I offer you eternity. No more pain, no more aging, no more watching your loved ones wither and die while you remain young and strong. I offer you power, the strength of 10 men, the speed of the hunting wolf, the ability to command lesser creatures and bend weak wills to your purpose. I offer you freedom from the limitations of your pathetic, mortal flesh. He stepped closer to the threshold, his eyes burning with dark fire. Join me, Mihail. Become my companion, my brother in darkness. Learn the secrets I have gathered across centuries. Walk beside me through the endless night and see wonders that would shatter the minds of ordinary men. I am so very tired of servants and slaves. I want an equal, someone who chose this existence with open eyes, who embraced damnation through courage, rather than accepting it through weakness. You're insane, Mihail whispered. Am I? Dracula's smile was terrible to behold. Look at yourself, brave hero. You are bleeding from a dozen wounds. Your back is a ruin of torn flesh. In 10 years you will be old and bent like your father. In 20, you will be in your grave, forgotten by all but your weeping widow and your ungrateful children. Your entire life, your courage, your love, your sacrifice will mean nothing. It will vanish like smoke on the wind. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a seductive whisper. But if you accept my gift, you will never die, never weaken, never fade. You could protect your village for 1,000 years. You could become the guardian this valley needs, standing eternal watch against threats far worse than I. Think of it, Mihail. Think of the good you could do with forever at your disposal. For a terrible moment, Mihail felt the temptation, felt the dark allure of those words wrapping around his heart like serpent coils. To never die, to never leave Elena and his son, to have the power to truly protect them, to fight back against the darkness instead of cowering before it. No, he said, his voice shaking but firm. I would rather die a man than live forever as a monster. Dracula's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment, perhaps, or respect, or both. How predictable, how tediously noble. He sighed, a sound like wind through empty halls. Very well. Since you refuse my generosity, let me present the alternative. The temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees in an instant. Frost crept across the doorframe. From outside, the wolves began howling again, closer now, circling the cottage in the darkness. If you will not join me willingly, Dracula said, his voice now cold as the grave, then you will give me what I came for, your wife. His gaze shifted to Elena, who gasped and clutched their son tighter. She is young, beautiful, strong. She will make an excellent bride. I will take her tonight, transform her before your eyes, and you will watch as she becomes something glorious and terrible. She will forget you, forget your child, forget everything but the hunger and the ecstasy of the hunt. No, Mihail raised the axe, stepping fully into the doorway to block Dracula's view of his family. You gave your word. I gave my word that no harm would come to you this night, and it will not. I will not lay a finger upon you, Mihail. Dracula's smile was a razor slash across his pale face. But I said nothing about tomorrow night, or the night after, or the night after that. Every sunset I will come to this door. Every darkness, I will knock and demand entry. I will kill everyone you love, one by one, night after night, until you either accept my offer or go mad from grief. Your son will be first. I will drain him so slowly he will have time to cry for his father. Then your wife. Then your parents, your friends, everyone in this wretched village who dared to celebrate your foolish heroism. You're a devil, Elena sobbed. I am a lord, Dracula corrected her, and this valley is my domain. These people are my cattle, and you... He fixed his terrible gaze back on Mihail. You are an insect who dared to bite the hand of his master. So now you will learn what happens when mortals overstep their place. There must be another way, Mihail said desperately. Some other price. Oh, but there is. Dracula's expression softened into something almost gentle, which was somehow worse than his anger. Accept my gift. Come with me willingly to the castle. Let me make you my companion, my heir, my brother in eternity. Do this and I will spare your wife and child. I will spare your entire village. I will never take another bride from Borgo, never send my servants to hunt among these houses. You have my oath, the one thing I cannot break. And if I refuse, then when the sun sets tomorrow I will return, and your son will die screaming. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Mihail felt his world crumbling around him, felt the trap closing with perfect, terrible precision. There was no third option. No clever escape, no miracle coming to save him. Either damn himself and save everyone he loved, or condemn them all to death. You have until dawn to decide, Dracula said, stepping back from the threshold. Think carefully, brave Mihail. Weigh your mortal soul against the lives of everyone you hold dear. Consider whether your principles are worth the blood of innocence. He turned to leave, then paused and glanced back over his shoulder. And know this, whatever you choose, you have already changed everything. You have reminded me what it feels like to be challenged. You have awakened something in me that has slept for decades. Win or lose, live or die, you will be remembered. Your name will echo through my castle long after your bones have turned to dust. Then he was gone, dissolving into shadow and mist, leaving only the sound of wolves fading into the distance and the bitter smell of old graves. Mihail stood in the doorway, the axe hanging forgotten from his hand, staring out at the darkness. Behind him, Elena wept softly, rocking their son in her arms. The baby had finally stopped crying, exhausted by his own terror. What are we going to do? Elena whispered. Mihail closed the door and bolted it, though he knew it meant nothing now. Then he sank to the floor, his back against the wall, his face in his hands. He had no answer. He had only until dawn to decide between damnation and death, and whichever he chose, he knew with terrible certainty that the man named Mihail, the simple farmer who loved his wife and worked his field, would not survive to see another sunset. Outside, the wind began to blow again, carrying with it the sound of distant thunder. A storm was coming to Borgo, and it would wash everything away in blood. The hours before dawn were the longest of Mihail's life. He sat at the small wooden table in the center of their cottage, a single candle burning between his trembling hands. Elena had finally gotten their son to sleep, and now sat across from him, her eyes red from weeping, but her gaze steady. Outside, the wind howled through Borgo like the voices of the damned, rattling the shutters and making the old cottage creak and groan. You can't do it, Elena said for the 10th time, her voice hoarse. Mihail, you cannot give yourself to that monster. Then what? He looked up at her and she flinched at the despair in his eyes. Let him kill our son? Let him butcher you? Stand by while he destroys the village in revenge? We could run. Take the baby and flee before sunset tomorrow. Where? Mihail slammed his hand on the table, making the candle flame jump. Where could we go that he couldn't find us? You heard him, Elena. He's lived for centuries. He's hunted across empires. Do you think we could outrun something like that? Do you think anywhere in this world is beyond his reach? Elena's face crumbled. Then we're already dead. All of us. Because if you become like him, you'll be lost to us anyway. The man I love will be gone, replaced by a monster, Mihail finished quietly. Yes, I know. They sat in silence, listening to the wind and the desperate beating of their own hearts. Somewhere in the village, a dog barked and was quickly silenced. Borgo held its breath, waiting to see what price would be paid for one man's defiance. Finally, as the first grey light of pre-dawn touched the eastern horizon, Elena reached across the table and took Mihail's hands in hers. Her touch was warm, alive, everything he would lose if he accepted Dracula's gift. Listen to me, she said fiercely. Whatever you decide, I will love you, Do you understand? If you go to that castle to save us, I will love you. If you refuse and we all die, I will love you. If you become a creature of darkness, some part of me will remember the man you were and love that memory until my last breath." Tears streamed down her face. "You are the bravest, most foolish, most beautiful soul I have ever known, and nothing, not death, not damnation, not eternity itself, can take that away." Mihail felt something break inside him. He stood and pulled Elena into his arms, holding her so tightly he could feel her heart beating against his chest. He breathed in the scent of her hair, memorized the warmth of her body, tried to burn this moment into whatever would remain of his soul after tonight. "I can't let our son die," he whispered into her hair. "I can't let you die, even if it costs me everything, even if it means becoming the very thing I fought against." Elena sobbed against his shoulder, but said nothing. What was there to say? They both knew he had already made his choice. Perhaps he had made it the moment he charged into that forest clearing to save the Constantine girls. Perhaps he had been walking this path from the very beginning, and every step had led inexorably to this moment. As dawn broke over the Carpathian Mountains, Mihail held his wife and child one last time as a human being. He whispered prayers he no longer believed would be answered. He wept tears that would be his last for eternity. Then he put on his cleanest shirt, kissed Elena's forehead, touched his sleeping son's cheek with infinite gentleness, and walked out the door. The village square was empty in the early morning light. Frost covered everything in a glittering shroud, making the world look clean and pure despite the corruption that festered in its heart. Mihail's breath plumed in the cold air as he began walking toward the north road, toward the mountain path, toward the black castle that crowned the world like a curse. He had gone perhaps 100 yards when Father Vasily emerged from the church, his face haggard with sleeplessness. "Mihail," the old priest called, hurrying toward him. "Wait, my son. Don't try to stop me, Father. I'm not here to stop you. I'm here to hear your confession." Father Vasily's eyes were kind, despite their sadness. "Whatever you're about to do, let me give you absolution first. Let me send you forth with your soul as clean as I can make it." Mihail almost laughed, but it came out as a sob. "I'm walking to my own damnation, Father. What good will confession do? Perhaps none. Perhaps everything. We don't always know God's ways." The priest took Mihail's arm gently. "5 minutes, that's all I ask. Let me do what little I can for you." They went into the church together, into the small confessional that smelled of old wood and older sins. In the dimness, with the morning light filtering weakly through the stained glass, Mihail told Father Vasily everything: the encounter at his door, the impossible choice, the decision that would damn him but save everyone he loved. When he finished, there was a long silence. Then Father Vasily spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "What you are about to do is not a sin, Mihail. It is a sacrifice. You are laying down your soul so that others might live. There is no greater love than this." The priest's hand found Mihail's through the confessional screen and gripped it tightly. "I do not know if God will forgive you for what you will become, but I believe, I have to believe, that he sees your heart, that he understands, and that somewhere beyond death and darkness and damnation, there is mercy even for the lost." "Thank you, Father," Mihail whispered. "Go with my blessing, my son, and know that I will pray for you every day for the rest of my life. I will light candles in your name. I will never forget what you did for us." Father Vasily's voice broke. "I will never forget your courage." Mihail left the church as the sun climbed higher, throwing his shadow long across the frost. He didn't look back at Borgo, at the village he had lived in all his life. He couldn't bear to see his cottage, knowing Elena watched from the window with their son. The climb to Castle Dracula took 3 hours. The path was steep and treacherous, winding through pine forests that grew increasingly twisted and wrong the higher he climbed. The air itself seemed thicker here, harder to breathe, as if the mountain rejected mortal life. Twice he saw bones scattered along the path, animal or human, he couldn't tell. When he finally emerged above the tree line, the castle loomed before him. It was even more terrible up close than from a distance. The walls were black stone that seemed to drink light, covered in crawling ivy that moved wrong, rustling even though there was no wind. The towers reached toward the sky like clawed fingers. The windows were dark eyes watching his approach. Above the main gate, carved in stone so old the letters had nearly worn away, was a single word in a language Mihail didn't recognize. The gates stood open, waiting for him. Mihail crossed the threshold and entered the courtyard. Frost covered the stones despite the morning sun. Nothing grew here, no grass, no weeds, nothing that lived. The silence was absolute, broken only by his footsteps echoing off the walls and the harsh rasp of his own breathing. "Welcome," a voice called from above. Mihail looked up to see Count Dracula standing on a balcony overlooking the courtyard. In the daylight, he looked even more unnatural. His skin too pale, his movements too fluid, everything about him slightly off in ways that made Mihail's hindbrain scream in terror. "I confess I did not expect you so soon," Dracula said, descending a stone staircase with inhuman grace. "Dawn has barely passed. I thought you would spend the day wrestling with your conscience, perhaps seek counsel from your village priest, maybe even attempt to flee. But here you are, walking into my home of your own free will. How delightfully efficient." "I'm here to accept your offer," Mihail said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'll become what you are. I'll serve you or accompany you, or whatever you want to call it. But first I need your oath, sworn on whatever power binds your kind, that my family and my village will be spared, forever." Dracula studied him for a long moment, those ancient eyes seeing far more than Mihail wanted to reveal. "You love them very much, don't you? Your wife, your child, these peasants who would likely turn on you if they knew what you're about to become. Swear it," Mihail demanded. "Give me your oath or kill me now, because I won't go through with this without it." So much courage, even in the face of damnation. Dracula smiled, and there was genuine approval in his expression. "Very well. I swear upon the blood that sustains me, upon the darkness that birthed me, upon the ancient powers that gave me dominion over death itself. Your family will not be harmed. Your village will not be touched. No bride will be taken from Borgo. No servant of mine will hunt within its boundaries, for as long as you walk beside me in the eternal night. This I swear, and my oath is iron. My word is law. It cannot be broken." As he spoke, the very air seemed to shimmer and solidify around his words, as if reality itself was recording the promise. Mihail felt something shift in the world, ancient magic binding the Count to his vow. "Now then," Dracula said, gesturing toward the castle entrance, "shall we begin? The transformation is not a simple thing. It requires preparation, ritual, and most importantly," his smile widened, "it requires you to drink deeply of my blood while I drain yours. We must become mixed, you and I, bound together in a way that transcends mere servitude. You will be my heir, Mihail, my companion through eternity, and you will see wonders and horrors beyond anything your mortal mind can currently comprehend." Mihail followed the Count into the castle, his legs moving mechanically, his mind strangely numb. They passed through corridors lined with portraits of stern aristocrats, through halls where suits of ancient armor stood like silent witnesses, past rooms whose purposes Mihail couldn't begin to guess. Finally, they entered a great chamber at the heart of the castle. It was circular, its walls carved with symbols that hurt to look at, its ceiling lost in shadow despite the hundreds of candles that burned with flames of unnatural colors, blue, green, violet. In the center of the room stood a stone altar, stained dark with centuries of blood, and there, emerging from the shadows around the room's perimeter, came Dracula's brides. There were 7 of them, all young women in various stages of transformation. Some retained hints of their former humanity, fear in their eyes, hesitation in their movements. Others had fully embraced their new nature and moved with the predatory grace of hunting cats, their eyes glowing faintly in the candlelight, their mouths curved in anticipation. "My children," Dracula said fondly, "come, bear witness to the birth of your new brother." The brides circled closer, studying Mihail with expressions ranging from curiosity to hunger, to something that might have been pity. One of them, a girl who couldn't have been more than 18 when she was turned, reached out to touch his face. "He's afraid," she whispered, her voice like wind through autumn leaves. "But he came anyway. How rare, how delicious." "Patience, my dear," Dracula chided gently. "He is not for feeding. Not yet. First, he must be reborn." The Count turned to Mihail, his expression grave. "This is your last chance to refuse, brave farmer. Once we begin, there is no turning back. You will die in every way that matters. The man you are will cease to exist. What rises in his place will wear your face and carry your memories, but it will be something else, something eternal and terrible and beautiful. Do you understand?" Mihail thought of Elena's face, his son's cry, the weight of the baby in his arms and the warmth of his wife's kiss. He thought of all the sunrises he would never see, all the harvests he would never reap, all the simple human joys he was about to surrender forever. "I understand," he said quietly. "Do it." Dracula nodded slowly, respect clear in his ancient eyes. "Then lie upon the altar, Mihail of Borgo. Lie down and prepare to die so that you might live forever." Mihail climbed onto the cold stone, his back against the blood-stained surface. The brides gathered closer, forming a circle around the altar, their faces eager and hungry. Above him, the shadows on the ceiling writhed and twisted like living things. Dracula leaned over him, one pale hand resting on Mihail's chest, directly over his heart. "Close your eyes," the Count commanded softly, "and think of what you love. Hold it tight in your mind, for it is the only thing that will remain of your humanity when this is done. Everything else will burn away. But love, true love, that is the one flame even death cannot extinguish." Mihail closed his eyes and saw Elena's face, heard his son's laughter, felt the warmth of the sun on his skin during harvest time, remembered the taste of his mother's bread, the sound of his father's voice, the smell of rain on new-turned earth. Then Dracula struck. The Count's teeth pierced Mihail's throat with surgical precision, and pain exploded through his body like lightning. It was agony beyond anything he had imagined, not just the physical tearing of flesh, but something deeper, more fundamental. He felt his life being pulled from him in great gulping swallows, felt his warmth draining away, felt his heart beginning to slow and falter. The world grew dim. Cold spread through his limbs like frost creeping across a window. His thoughts became sluggish, confused. He was dying, actually dying. This was what it felt like to slip away from the world of the living. Then Dracula pulled back, and Mihail gasped for air he no longer needed. The Count's wrist was at his lips, cut open, blood, impossibly dark, impossibly cold, flowing from the wound. "Drink," Dracula commanded. "Drink, and be born anew." Mihail's lips parted. The blood touched his tongue, and everything changed. It was like swallowing liquid darkness, like drinking night itself. The blood was cold fire, burning ice, ecstasy and agony, and 1,000 other sensations that had no names. It poured down his throat and spread through his dying body like poison, like medicine, like something that was both and neither. His heart stuttered, stopped, began beating again with a rhythm that was subtly wrong, subtly other. His blood, what remained of it, mixed with Dracula's ancient ichor, transforming, corrupting, evolving. His senses exploded. Suddenly he could hear every sound in the castle, rats in the walls, bats in the rafters, the breathing of the brides around him. He could smell blood and fear and old stone, and the particular scent of decay that clung to everything undead. He could feel the vibrations of life in the village far below, could sense each heartbeat like a drum calling to him, and he was so hungry. Mihail opened his eyes, and the world was different. Colors were muted, but somehow more vivid. Shadows had depth and texture. The candlelight that had seemed warm now felt harsh and aggressive. He sat up on the altar, and movement felt strange. Too fast, too smooth, like gliding rather than moving. He looked down at his hands, and saw they were paler, the veins beneath the skin visible like dark rivers. "Welcome," Dracula said, his voice filled with dark satisfaction, "to eternity." The brides applauded, a sound like breaking glass. One of them came forward and offered Mihail a goblet filled with blood still warm from a recent kill. His stomach lurched with revulsion, but beneath it was a hunger so intense it made his newfound strength tremble. "Drink," the bride urged, her eyes glowing. "You must feed. The transformation is not complete until you take your first willing drink of human blood." Mihail stared at the goblet. This was it, the final step, the point of no return. Once he drank, he would truly be damned, truly one of them. But he had come too far to stop now. He had given up everything to reach this moment. He took the goblet and drank deeply. The blood was sweeter than anything he had ever tasted. It sang through his transformed veins, filled him with strength and power and a terrible euphoric sense of completion. He drank until the goblet was empty, until the last drop was gone, and then he threw back his head and screamed, not in anguish but in something far more terrifying, in triumph, in hunger, in the death of everything he had been and the birth of everything he would become. And far below, in a small cottage in Borgo, Elena heard that scream on the wind and knew with absolute certainty that her husband was gone forever. She clutched their crying son to her chest and wept for the man she had loved, the man who had sacrificed his soul to save her life. She wept for Mihail, who had died, so that others might live. She wept for the monster that now bore his face. And she prayed, though she knew her prayers would not be answered, that somehow, somewhere in the darkness of his new existence, a spark of the man she loved might yet remain, even though she knew in her heart that such hope was the cruelest lie of all. 3 weeks passed in the castle like a fever dream. Mihail learned quickly what it meant to be one of the undead. He learned that daylight was not instant death, as the legends claimed, but rather a creeping weakness that made his transformed flesh sluggish and his mind foggy. He learned to hunt in the darkness, to move within human speed, to hear a heartbeat from 100 yards away and smell fear like perfume on the wind. He learned to sleep in the crypts beneath the castle, surrounded by ancient coffins and the whisper of centuries-old bones. But most of all, he learned to hunger. The thirst was constant, gnawing, impossible to ignore. It lived in his throat like a living thing, clawing and demanding and promising ecstasy if only he would feed. Human blood was sweetest, richest, most satisfying. Animal blood could sustain him, but left him feeling hollow and irritable, and the blood of the willing, those who surrendered to the bite with sighs of pleasure rather than screams of terror, that was ambrosia beyond description. Dracula was a patient teacher. He showed Mihail how to mesmerize victims with a glance, how to move through shadows like smoke, how to command wolves and bats and other creatures of the night. He taught him the history of their kind, the ancient wars between vampire lords, the secret societies that hunted them, the rituals that could grant even greater power. You are no longer bound by mortal limitations, the Count explained one night, as they stood together on the castle's highest tower, watching the moon rise over the Carpathians. You can become mist, or wolf, or 1,000 other forms if you master the necessary disciplines. You can live for millennia watching empires crumble and new civilizations rise from the ashes. You are in every way that matters, a god compared to the cattle you once were. But Mihail did not feel like a god. He felt like a ghost haunting the corpse of his former life. Every night as he roamed the castle or hunted in the forests beyond, his thoughts turned to Borgo, to Elena, to his son, who would be growing and changing while his father remained frozen in this state of undeath. He wondered if the boy would remember him, if Elena told him stories about the farmer who had loved them enough to damn himself. He wondered if she hated him for what he had become. The brides tried to make him forget. They flirted and tempted, offered companionship and pleasure, and the dark joy of shared hunts. Some were kind in their way, particularly Katya, the youngest, who seemed to remember more of her humanity than the others. She would sit with Mihail in the library sometimes, reading aloud from ancient books, trying to teach him the languages Dracula knew. "It gets easier," she told him one evening, her voice carrying the faint accent of her Moldavian birthplace. "The memories fade, the guilt becomes distant. In 10 years you'll barely remember their faces. In 50 you'll wonder why you ever cared about such fleeting things as love and family." "Is that supposed to comfort me?" Mihail asked bitterly. Katya smiled sadly. "No, but it's the truth. We all struggled at first. We all grieved for what we lost. But the hunger makes you forget. The power makes you forget. Eventually you'll realize that we're the lucky ones. We're eternal while they wither and die like flowers in winter." But Mihail couldn't make himself believe that. Every time he fed, every time he sank his fangs into warm flesh and drank deep, he saw Elena's face in his mind, heard his son's cry, remembered what it felt like to be human, to be good, to be capable of love rather than hunger. 1 month after his transformation, Dracula summoned him to the great hall. "You have adapted well," the Count said, reclining in his throne-like chair, a goblet of blood in his elegant hand. "Better than I expected, truth be told. Some new vampires go mad in the first weeks, driven insane by the transition. But you have retained your mind, your sense of self. This pleases me greatly." "I'm so glad," Mihail said flatly. Dracula's eyes flashed with amusement. "Still bitter? Still mourning your lost humanity? My dear boy, you must learn to embrace what you are. Fighting against your nature will only bring you pain. My nature was to love my family and work my land. This," Mihail gestured at himself, at the castle, at everything he had become. "This isn't nature. This is corruption. This is wrong." "Is it?" Dracula leaned forward, his expression intense. "Tell me, Mihail, when you hunt, when you feed, when you feel the life of another flowing into you and making you strong, in that moment, does it feel wrong? Or does it feel glorious?" Mihail looked away, unable to answer, because the terrible truth was that it did feel glorious. The hunt, the bite, the feeding, it filled him with ecstasy and power and a savage joy that terrified him. Part of him, The part that was no longer human loved what he had become, and that was the most horrifying thing of all. "I thought as much," Dracula said softly. "You're beginning to understand. The conflict you feel is natural, but it will pass. Soon you'll stop fighting and simply accept. And when that day comes, you'll be truly free." "Free?" Mihail laughed bitterly. "I'm a prisoner of this castle, a slave to hunger, damned for eternity. That's not freedom." "But you are not a prisoner." Dracula stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the moonlit landscape. "You may leave whenever you wish. Roam the forests, visit the neighboring villages. You are bound to me by oath and blood, yes, but you are not confined. In fact," he turned back to Mihail with a calculating expression, "I have a gift for you, a test, if you will." Dread pooled in Mihail's stomach. "What kind of test?" "Tomorrow night, you will return to Borgo. You will walk through your village, see your wife, look upon your child, and you will do nothing to harm them. You will prove to me and to yourself that you have the strength to resist the hunger, even when surrounded by everything you once loved." Mihail felt his dead heart clench. "No, I can't. If I go back there, if I see them—" "You will maintain control," Dracula interrupted firmly. "Because if you do not, if you give in to the hunger and hurt them, then you will have failed. And failures, my dear Mihail, must be punished. Should you harm anyone in Borgo, I will consider our agreement void. I will take your wife as my newest bride and your son as a servant. This, I swear." "You bastard," Mihail whispered. "You're testing me. You want to see if I'll break." "Of course I am," Dracula agreed easily. "You are unique among my children, Mihail. You came to me willingly, driven by love rather than hunger or fear. You retain far more of your former self than any vampire I have ever created. I need to know if that makes you stronger or weaker, if you are truly capable of walking the line between darkness and whatever shreds of light you still carry. And if I refuse, then I will assume you are too weak to be of use to me, and I will kill you. Properly, permanently." Dracula's smile was cold. "So you see, you have no choice. Tomorrow night you return to Borgo. You will face your former life, and you will prove that you can exist in both worlds, the world of the living and the world of the dead." The next evening came far too quickly. Mihail stood at the edge of Borgo as the sun set, his enhanced senses already picking up the sounds and smells of the village: wood smoke, cooking food, the murmur of voices as families gathered for their evening meals, and underneath it all the steady drum of heartbeats, dozens of them, hundreds, each one calling to the hunger that lived in his throat like fire. He could hear Elena's heartbeat among them, could pick it out from all the others like a familiar melody, could sense her in their cottage moving about, speaking softly to their son. The pull toward her was magnetic, overwhelming. Mihail forced himself to walk forward into the village square. The change in Borgo was immediate and dramatic. People stopped mid-conversation. Children froze in their play. Every eye turned to him, and in those gazes he saw fear and horror and recognition. They knew what he was. Father Vasile emerged from the church, his face pale but determined. He held a silver cross before him like a shield. "Mihail," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "you should not be here." "I know," Mihail replied, and was disturbed by how different his voice sounded. Smoother, colder, inhuman. "But I had to come. I had to see—" He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "Your family is safe," Father Vasile said quickly, "as is the village. The Count has kept his word. No one has been taken. No servants have come hunting. We have been spared because of me," Mihail said, "because I gave myself to him. Yes." The priest lowered the cross slightly. "We know what you did, what you sacrificed. Elena told us everything." His eyes glistened with tears. "You saved us all, Mihail, but at such a terrible cost." People were emerging from their homes now, gathering in the square but keeping their distance. Mihail saw faces he had known his entire life, neighbors, friends, people he had helped, and who had helped him in turn. All of them looked at him with the same expression: fear mixed with pity, mixed with gratitude, mixed with revulsion. Then the crowd parted, and Elena was there. She had aged in the month since he'd seen her. New lines marked her face, and her eyes held a grief so profound it made Mihail's chest ache with phantom pain. She carried their son in her arms, and the baby, grown noticeably in just 4 weeks, stared at Mihail with wide, curious eyes. "Elena," Mihail breathed, taking a step toward her. She didn't flee, didn't scream. She simply stood there looking at him with an expression that broke what remained of his heart. "Mihail," she said softly, "is it really you? Is there anything of you left inside that thing?" "I don't know," he admitted honestly. "I remember everything. I remember loving you. I remember holding our son, but it's like looking at someone else's memories through frosted glass. Distant, faded. Do you want to hurt us?" Elena asked, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "Do you hunger for us?" The hunger roared to life at her words, at the scent of her blood so close, at the sound of her heartbeat and the smaller, faster rhythm of their son's pulse. Mihail felt his fangs extend, felt his vision sharpen, felt every instinct screaming at him to feed. But beneath that, deeper than the hunger, was something else, a memory of love so strong it had driven him to damnation, a ghost of the man he had been, crying out in anguish at what he had become. "Yes," Mihail said, his voice cracking. "God help me, yes. Every fiber of my being wants to bite you, to drink you, to make you like me so you'll never leave me. The hunger it's worse than anything I ever imagined. It's all I can think about." Elena took a step closer and the crowd gasped in horror, but she ignored them, walking toward Mihail until she stood within arm's reach. She was so close he could see the pulse in her throat, could smell the warmth of her skin. "But you won't," she said quietly. "Will you? Because you're still my Mihail. Still the man who loved me more than his own soul. Still the father who would die 1,000 times to protect his child." "I'm a monster," Mihail whispered. "Yes." Elena reached up and touched his face with gentle fingers. Her skin was warm against his cold flesh. "But you're my monster. And I have to believe, that the man I loved is still in there somewhere, fighting to stay human even though humanity is lost to him forever." Their son reached toward Mihail, making the soft sounds babies make. And without thinking, Mihail extended his hand, letting tiny fingers wrap around one pale finger. The touch was like lightning, like fire, like a key turning in a lock. In that moment, feeling his son's grip, Mihail remembered everything, not as distant memories but as living, vital things. He remembered holding Elena on their wedding night, remembered the first time he felt their son kick in her belly, remembered the weight of the baby in his arms and the way his heart had felt too large for his chest with love. The hunger was still there. The darkness was still there. But for just a moment, it was pushed back by something stronger. Something that might have been hope. Mihail carefully extracted his finger from his son's grip and stepped back. "I have to go," he said hoarsely. "I can't stay. If I stay too long, I might lose control." "Will you come back?" Elena asked. "I don't know. Maybe. If I can bear it." Mihail looked at her, really looked at her, trying to memorize every detail. "I love you, both of you. That hasn't changed. That's the only thing that hasn't changed." "I love you too," Elena whispered. "Whatever you've become, whatever you'll be, I will always love the man you were, the man who saved us all." Mihail turned and fled before he could say anything else, before the hunger could overcome his resolve. He ran through the village and into the forest, moving with inhuman speed, putting distance between himself and the only things in the world he still cared about. He ran until he reached a small clearing far from any habitation. There he collapsed to his knees and screamed, a sound of rage and grief and loss that echoed through the mountains like a death cry. He had passed Dracula's test. He had seen his family and resisted the urge to harm them. He had proven that some thread of humanity still existed within him, but the victory felt hollow, because he knew, with terrible, absolute certainty, that every time he returned to Borgo, it would be harder. Every visit would erode his control a little more. Eventually, inevitably, the hunger would win. Eventually, he would become exactly the monster Dracula wanted him to be, and on that day, everything he had sacrificed would have been for nothing. Far away, in the highest tower of Castle Dracula, the Count smiled into the darkness. "Fascinating," he murmured. "The boy has more strength than I anticipated. Love is proving to be an unexpected anchor." He drummed his fingers against the stone windowsill, thinking, "This changes things. If he can maintain his humanity even after transformation, if he can resist the hunger through force of will." He trailed off, his ancient mind racing with possibilities. Perhaps Mihail was not just a companion or an heir. Perhaps he was something far more valuable. Perhaps he was hope. Not for redemption, Dracula was far too old and too steeped in darkness to believe in such fairy tales, but hope for something else, something new. A vampire who could walk in both worlds, bound to neither, capable of things that even the Count, with all his centuries of power and knowledge, had never considered possible. "Come back to me, little hero," Dracula whispered to the night. "Come back, and let us see just how far your love can carry you into the darkness. Let us see if you can achieve what no creature of the night has ever managed, to remain, in some essential way, human." The Count's smile widened. "And if you succeed, Mihail of Borgo, then perhaps, just perhaps, you will teach even me something I have forgotten in my long centuries of existence." He laughed then, a sound like breaking ice, and somewhere in the forest, Mihail heard that laughter on the wind and knew that his trials were far from over. The true test was yet to come. 6 months passed like a slow descent into darkness. Mihail visited Borgo once each week, always at dusk when the sun had set, but the villagers still moved about. Each visit was agony. Each time he saw Eleanor and his son, now crawling, babbling, growing, the hunger grew stronger and his control grew weaker. He could feel himself slipping, feel the human part of him being worn away by the constant assault of his vampire nature. But he kept returning, because as long as he could look at them and walk away without harming them, he was still Mihail, still the man who had chosen damnation to save the ones he loved. Dracula watched these visits with increasing fascination. The Count had never seen anything like it, a vampire actively fighting against his nature, clinging to love and memory as if they were lifelines in a storm. It defied everything Dracula knew about their kind. Vampires were creatures of hunger and power. They did not love, they did not sacrifice. They took what they wanted and destroyed what stood in their way. Yet here was Mihail, proving impossible every single night. On a cold evening in late autumn, Dracula summoned Mihail to the library. The Count sat in a high-backed chair, an ancient book open on his lap, his expression thoughtful. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to a chair across from him. Mihail obeyed, wary of the contemplative mood he sensed in his master. Dracula was most dangerous when he was thinking. "I have been considering your situation," the Count began, closing his book with a soft thud. "You are an anomaly, Mihail, a vampire who refuses to fully embrace what he is, who clings to his humanity like a drowning man clutches driftwood. At first, I thought this was weakness. Now I am not so certain." "What do you want from me?" Mihail asked tiredly. "I want to make you an offer." Dracula leaned forward, his dark eyes gleaming. "A bargain, if you will, one that could change everything." Mihail's stomach clenched with dread. "I'm not interested in more bargains with you. You will be interested in this one." Dracula's smile was sharp. "I can make you human again." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Mihail stared at the Count, certain he had misheard. "What? There is a ritual," Dracula explained calmly. "Ancient, dangerous, requiring components that are difficult to obtain and sacrifices that are not easily made. But it exists, a way to reverse the transformation, to restore mortality to one who has crossed into death." He paused, letting this sink in. "I could make you human again, Mihail, give you back your heartbeat, your warmth, your ability to walk in sunlight without weakness. You could return to your wife and child, not as a monster visiting in the night, but as the man they remember, the husband, the father." Mihail felt something he had not felt in months. Hope. Terrible, dangerous hope that made his dead heart ache. "Why?" he managed to ask. "Why would you do this?" "Because you fascinate me." Dracula's honesty was somehow more frightening than a lie would have been. "In 5 centuries of existence, I have never met anyone like you. You have shown me that perhaps there is more to our condition than I believed, that perhaps we are not simply slaves to hunger and darkness. You have made me curious about possibilities I had long dismissed." "And what do you want in exchange?" Dracula smiled. 7 years. You will serve me as you do now for 7 more years. During that time you will be my companion, my student, my heir in all things. You will learn everything I have to teach, the full depths of our power, the secrets of centuries, the dark knowledge that most vampires never achieve, and at the end of those 7 years, I will perform the ritual that will make you human again. You will return to Borgo, to your family, and you will live out the remainder of your mortal life in peace. This I swear." Mihail's mind reeled. 7 years. 7 years of hunger and darkness, and becoming more monstrous with each passing night. 7 years of watching his son grow from a distance, of seeing Elena age while he remained frozen in undeath, but at the end of it, humanity, life, the chance to hold his family again as a living man rather than a walking corpse. "There must be a catch," Mihail said slowly. "You wouldn't offer this without some hidden price. How well you know me already." Dracula's expression grew serious. "The catch, as you put it, is this. 7 years, is a long time. Long enough for the hunger to fully consume you. Long enough for your memories of love to fade to nothing. Long enough for you to become what you fear most, a true monster, incapable of compassion or mercy. If that happens, if you lose yourself completely before the 7 years are up, then the ritual will not work. You must retain some core of humanity for the transformation back to work. Lose that, and you will remain a vampire forever. So I have to fight against my nature for 7 years, knowing that if I slip even once, if I give in completely to what I am, I'll lose everything. Precisely. Dracula's smile was cold. It is a gamble, Mihail. A test of whether your love is truly strong enough to sustain you through years of darkness. Most vampires would lose themselves within months. But you might actually succeed. And I am curious to see if you do. Mihail closed his eyes, thinking. 7 years seemed like an eternity. His son would be 7 years old by the time he returned, old enough to have forgotten his father entirely. Elena would have lived alone all that time, raising their child, mourning a husband who was neither dead nor truly alive. But the alternative was to remain a vampire forever, to eventually lose control and hurt the very people he had sacrificed everything to protect, to watch them age and die while he continued on through centuries of lonely darkness. I need to speak with Elena, Mihail said finally. This affects her too. She deserves to know, to have a say in this decision. Dracula considered this, then nodded slowly. Very well, go to her tonight, tell her of my offer, but know this, she cannot make this choice for you. Only you can decide if 7 years of damnation is worth the possibility of redemption. That night, Mihail stood outside his cottage in Borgo, gathering the courage to knock. Inside, he could hear Elena singing softly to their son, a lullaby he remembered from his own childhood. The sound pierced him like a blade. He knocked gently. The singing stopped. Footsteps approached. The door opened and Elena stood there, her face illuminated by candlelight. She had been expecting him. She always seemed to know when he would visit. "Mihail," she said softly, "come in." It was the first time she had invited him inside since his transformation. Mihail crossed the threshold with a sense of profound wrongness, a monster entering a place of safety and love. But Elena showed no fear. She closed the door behind him and gestured to the table. "Sit. I'll make tea." She paused, then added with a sad smile, "Though I suppose you don't drink tea anymore." "No," Mihail admitted, "but I'd like to watch you drink it, to pretend for a moment that things are normal." They sat together while Elena prepared the tea, their son sleeping peacefully in his cradle by the fire. The domesticity of the scene was almost unbearable. This was what Mihail had lost. This quiet warmth, this simple comfort of shared space and familiar rituals. When Elena sat across from him, cradling her cup between her hands, Mihail told her everything: the Count's offer, the 7-year bargain, the possibility of becoming human again, and the terrible risk that he might lose himself before that could happen. Elena listened in silence, her face unreadable. When he finished, she sat for a long time, staring into her tea as if seeking answers in its depths. 7 years, she finally said. Our son will be old enough to go to school, old enough to ask questions about his father that I won't know how to answer. I know, and there's no guarantee it will work. You might endure 7 years of torment and still remain a monster. Yes, but if it does work, if you succeed, you would come back to us, really back to us, not as a visiting ghost, but as a living man. That's what he promised. Elena looked up at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Then you have to try, Mihail, you have to take this chance. Even knowing I might fail, even knowing that I might visit you less and less as the hunger grows stronger, that I might become something you don't recognize. Yes. Elena reached across the table and took his cold hand in her warm one. Because the alternative is accepting that you're lost to us forever, and I can't do that. I won't. As long as there's even the smallest chance that you can come back, that we can be a family again, we have to take it. I'm afraid, Mihail admitted, his voice breaking. I'm afraid I'm not strong enough, that my love for you won't be enough to sustain me through 7 years of darkness. Elena stood and came around the table. She pulled Mihail to his feet and embraced him, pressing her warm body against his cold one. You are the strongest man I've ever known, she whispered fiercely. You gave up your soul to save us. You fight against your nature every single day. If anyone can survive this, it's you. Mihail held her, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. In that moment, he made his decision. I'll do it, he said. I'll endure the 7 years. And I'll come back to you. I swear it. The years that followed were the hardest of Mihail's existence. Dracula was a demanding teacher, pushing Mihail to master abilities that most vampires never achieved. He learned to transform into mist and wolf, to command lesser creatures, to move with such speed he became nearly invisible. He learned languages: Latin, Greek, Turkish, Romanian, Hungarian. He studied history and philosophy, poetry and warfare. Dracula wanted him to be not just powerful, but educated, refined, a true nobleman of the night. But the knowledge came at a cost. Each new power awakened the hunger more intensely. Each feeding left him feeling more disconnected from his humanity. The memories of Elena and his son, once bright and clear, began to fade like old paintings exposed to sunlight. By the third year, Mihail could go weeks without thinking of them. By the fifth year, he sometimes forgot why he was enduring this torment at all. The brides noticed the change in him. Katya, who had befriended him early on, watched with sad eyes as he became colder, more ruthless, more vampire, and less man. "You're losing yourself," she told him one night. "The Mihail who first came to this castle wouldn't recognize what you're becoming." "Perhaps that's for the best," Mihail replied, his voice empty of emotion. That Mihail was weak, sentimental, a fool who believed love could conquer anything. But late at night, when he lay in his coffin beneath the castle, Mihail would force himself to remember. He would recite Elena's name like a prayer. He would try to recall the sound of his son's laughter, the warmth of sunlight on his skin, the taste of his mother's bread. He clung to these memories like a drowning man, knowing that if he let them go entirely, he would be lost forever. In the 6th year, something happened that changed everything. A vampire hunter came to the castle, a young priest named Thomas, who had tracked Dracula across half of Europe. He was brave but foolish, armed with crosses and holy water, and the conviction that God would protect him. Dracula captured him easily and brought him before Mihail. "Kill him," the Count commanded. "Drain him dry. Show me that you have fully embraced what you are." Mihail looked at the priest, barely 20 years old, trembling with fear but defiant, and saw himself. Saw the man he had been when he charged into that forest clearing to save the Constantine girls. Saw the courage and faith and desperate hope that had driven him to defy a monster. "No," Mihail said quietly. Dracula's eyes widened with surprise. "What did you say?" "I said no, I won't kill him. He's just a boy. A fool maybe, but a brave one. He doesn't deserve to die like this." "You dare refuse me?" Dracula's voice was soft, dangerous. "Yes." Mihail met the Count's gaze without flinching. "You wanted to know if I could retain my humanity through years of darkness. Well, here's your answer. I'm still human enough to say no to senseless cruelty. Still human enough to show mercy. If that makes me weak in your eyes, so be it." For a long moment, Dracula simply stared at him. Then, incredibly, the Count began to laugh, a genuine sound of surprise and delight. "Remarkable. After all this time, after everything you've learned and become, you can still surprise me." He waved a hand dismissively. "Very well, spare the priest. Send him away with a message for his superiors, that Castle Dracula is not to be trifled with. Perhaps he'll be wise enough to heed it." Mihail did more than that. He helped Thomas escape, guiding him down the mountain and pointing him towards safety. Before they parted, the young priest looked at Mihail with a mixture of fear and confusion. "Why did you help me? You're one of them." "I used to be one of you," Mihail replied. "And with God's grace I will be again. Now go, get as far from here as you can, and remember that not all monsters are beyond redemption." Thomas fled into the night, and Mihail returned to the castle knowing he had crossed a line. He had defied Dracula and shown mercy to an enemy. It was a turning point, proof that even after 6 years of darkness, some essential part of him remained unchanged. The 7th year was the longest. The hunger was now a constant roar in Mihail's mind, drowning out almost everything else. He fed more frequently, hunted with savage efficiency, and felt himself teetering on the edge of complete transformation into the monster he had always feared becoming. But he held on. He held on because Elena's face, dim and faded though it had become in his memory, was still there. He held on because somewhere in the world was a son who might still know his name. He held on because giving up now after enduring so much would make all the suffering meaningless. On the last night of the 7th year, Dracula came to him. "It is time," the Count said simply. They went to the ritual chamber deep beneath the castle, a place Mihail had never been allowed to enter before. The walls were covered in symbols that hurt to look at, and the air itself seemed thick with ancient power. In the center of the room stood an altar, and around it were arranged various components: herbs, crystals, vials of mysterious liquids. "The ritual will be agonizing," Dracula warned as he prepared. "You will feel your vampire nature being torn from you, burned away. Many who have attempted this died screaming. Are you certain you want to proceed?" "I've been certain for 7 years," Mihail replied. "Then lie upon the altar and steel yourself. This will make your transformation into a vampire seem like a pleasant dream by comparison." Mihail lay down. Dracula began to chant in a language older than Latin, older than Greek, older than anything human ears were meant to hear. He poured the liquids over Mihail's body, pressed the herbs to his chest, placed the crystals around him in a specific pattern. Then the pain began. It was fire and ice and lightning and knives all at once, tearing through every fiber of his being. Mihail screamed as he felt his vampire nature being ripped away. The hunger, the power, the darkness that had sustained him for 7 years. He felt his fangs retracting, his skin warming, his heart stuttering back to life with painful, irregular beats. He screamed until his throat was raw. He convulsed until he thought his bones would shatter. He died and was reborn in agony so complete it transcended words. And then, suddenly, it was over. Mihail lay gasping on the altar, his body drenched in sweat. Actual sweat, warm and human. His heart beat with a steady, living rhythm. His skin was no longer pale as marble but flushed with blood and life. He drew breath not from habit, but from necessity, his lungs burning with the sweet pain of oxygen. He was human. Dracula looked down at him with an expression that might have been satisfaction or might have been regret. "It is done. You are mortal once more, Mihail of Borgo. The sun will not harm you. Food and drink will sustain you. You will age and eventually die as all humans do. You are free." Mihail sat up slowly, testing his restored mortality. Everything felt strange. His body was weaker, but somehow more real, more present. The hunger was gone, replaced by ordinary human sensations: thirst, fatigue, the dull ache of muscles pushed to their limit. "Go," Dracula said softly. "Return to your family. Live out the remainder of your days in peace. You have earned it." "Why?" Mihail asked, his voice hoarse. "Why did you really do this? What did you gain?" Dracula was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a melancholy that Mihail had never heard before. "You showed me something I thought was lost forever, that love can endure even through damnation, that humanity is not merely a condition of mortality, but a choice made again and again, night after night, against all odds and all nature." He turned away. "Perhaps there is hope for creatures like us after all, or perhaps you were simply an aberration, never to be repeated. Either way, you have given me 7 years of wonder. That is payment enough." Mihail stood on shaking legs. "Thank you for keeping your word, for giving me this chance." "Do not thank me, Mihail. I am still a monster. I will still take brides and feed on innocence and rule these mountains with terror. Your redemption changes nothing for anyone but yourself." Dracula's smile was bitter. "But perhaps in some distant century, when I have grown weary enough of existence, I will remember you, and I will wonder if there might be a way back from darkness for even the oldest and most damned of us." Mihail left the castle as dawn broke over the Carpathians. The sunlight touched his skin and it did not burn. Instead, it felt warm and golden and impossibly beautiful. He walked down the mountain path, his legs trembling with exhaustion and newborn life, his heart full of a hope so fierce it hurt. By the time he reached Borgo, it was mid-morning. The village was going about its daily routines. Children playing, women washing clothes, men working in the fields. They saw him coming and stopped, staring in disbelief. Father Vasile emerged from the church, his hands trembling as he held up a silver cross. But when he saw Mihail's reflection in a window, saw him walking freely in sunlight, the priest's face transformed with joy and wonder. "Merciful God," he whispered. "It's true. You're human again." Mihail didn't stop to explain. He walked straight to his cottage and knocked on the door. Elena opened it, her son, now 7 years old, tall and strong, standing beside her. She looked at Mihail, really looked at him, and her hand flew to her mouth. "Mihail," she breathed. "Is it really you?" "It's me," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm home, Elena. I'm finally home." She threw herself into his arms, sobbing against his chest. Their son, who had no memory of his father, watched with wide, uncertain eyes, but Mihail simply held his wife, feeling her warmth, her tears, her living, breathing presence, and knew that every moment of those 7 years had been worth it. He was human. He was alive. He was home. And though the scars of what he had endured would never fully heal, though nightmares of hunger and darkness would haunt him for the rest of his days, though he would sometimes wake in the night and wonder if he had truly escaped or if this was just another dream, despite all of that, Mihail had won. Love had proven stronger than death. Hope had outlasted damnation. And in the end, that was enough. In the highest tower of Castle Dracula, the Count watched the reunion through the eyes of a bat that circled the cottage. He watched Mihail embrace his family, watched them cry and laugh and begin to heal. And for the first time in 5 centuries, Count Dracula felt something he had thought long dead in his chest. Not regret, precisely. Not hope for himself. But perhaps, just perhaps, a glimmer of understanding that the world was more complex than he had believed. That monsters could choose mercy. That damnation was not always absolute. That love in its truest form could survive even the longest night. "Farewell, Mihail of Borgo," he whispered to the wind. "May you find in your remaining years the peace that will forever elude me." Then he turned from the window and retreated into the shadows of his ancient castle, where he would remain for years to come, still a monster, still a terror in the darkness, still the Count of the Carpathians, but changed in some small and indefinable way by the memory of a simple farmer who had dared to love more than he feared death, and who had proven that even the damned could find their way home. The story of Mihail and the Count became a legend in Borgo, passed down through generations. Some said it was a warning about the price of defiance, others said it was a tale of hope, proof that redemption was possible even in the darkest circumstances. But for Mihail himself, it was simply the story of a man who loved his family enough to walk through hell and back again. And in the end, that was the only story that mattered.